What's up, guys? Fantasy Aristotle here on this week's episode. We got special guest Juju Talk Sports with me today. Let's get a episode 25 on 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Quiet on the set, make sure my mic is on. Aris, Dre, and Juju dog diving towards the pylon. Go for 2, so damn rude, recognize authority. Spitting tips for fantasy, no way you're outscoring me. Bold predictions with conviction every single day. Sports addiction, no restriction, kicking game like Pele. He's the greatest, what's the basis? Pick an athlete, let's debate this game. Outrageous, trading places, sudden death, take 10 paces. Turn and shoot, boys the truth, Mamba mentality. Future greats take their place, dreams become reality. Low and outside, knocked it out the park. Your boy discovered fire like a rock with a spark. Refs acting like Neanderthals, phantom flags, nothing calls. Heartbreak losses, tragic falls, every week discuss it all. Settle in, listen up, free your time like Andrew Luck. Show's about to start, I suggest you buckle up.
Episode 25.
I think that might be the best one that we've ever done because there's always somebody that's like 5 seconds later. Oh, episode 25.
Aris, I got a question for you. What's better than 24? 25. SpongeBob reference for you 90s kids out there. Enjoy it.
Yeah, I was never a big fan of SpongeBob growing up.
Wow. We're going to start that flame war here at the start of the podcast, and we're not going to save that for later.
No, let's do it right now.
You know, let's do this, actually. What is your, favorite – so we always ask favorite sports movie, but, what is, your favorite, 90s cartoon growing up?
So it probably wasn't the 90s. I think it started in the 2000s, but it was Transformers Armada.
Okay.
I was
so
a huge Transformers.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a huge Transformers fan growing up. I had the original cartoon series on DVD, so I was always a huge Transformers fan. So that would have to be my favorite one growing up.
I was a big Ed and Eddie guy. That was kind of like my.
Funny.
Yeah, it was hilarious, and I still watched a few episodes recently. Still kind of holds up, man. I mean, maybe it's just Eddie scheming, just everything he can to make a buck. I live that. I understand that lifestyle now. So
those big old jawbreakers that their face were this big.
Basically, if you're a young, aspiring entrepreneur, Ed, and Eddie was the show for you. And I think, honestly, all our modern entrepreneurs were Ed, and Eddie fans as kids.
So we'll go ahead and step away from the cartoons, but stay in that fantasy realm because here it is, the Fantasy Sports Show. So episode 25. But first, let's hear from one of our sponsors. Julian, you're wearing that T-shirt right now. Manscaped, bust the slump in the pants for you guys. Code is slump. You get 20% off plus free shipping. Julian, let's hear the commercial.
All right. And a word from our sponsors.
This is a message brought to you by the Foundation for a Perfect Package.
Why do I need Manscaped?
Why do I need Manscaped?
Why do I need Manscaped?
Because the only frill I want is the one up top.
Because being in a relationship is not an excuse to be lazy.
Because I like talking ball, not smelling like them.
Because deforestation is proven to prevent forest fires.
Manscaped is the only brand dedicated to below-the-waist grooming.
Manscaped's Crop Preserver guarantees that you smell your best all day long.
Manscaped Boxer Briefs are the most comfortable underwear on the market.
Manscaped's advanced skincare technology makes nicks a thing of the past.
Manscaped is the #1 in men's grooming. Subscribers get 2 free blade refills every 3 months. Get 20% off plus free shipping and handling with the promo code SLUMP at manscaped.com. That's the promo code SLUMP at manscaped.com. Get your Lawnmower 3.0 today.
We are the Slumpbusters.
And we approve this message.
And we are back. So again, use promo code SLUMP, get 20% off and free shipping That thing is amazing. I actually love their underwear. It's super comfortable. So get the big box from them. Get a pair of underwear, and they are phenomenal. They're pretty freaking comfortable. But
yeah, just hugs everything, keeps everything all in place. Not a lot of shifting going around on there.
Exactly. But let's go ahead and get into the show. So we're going to kind of break down some news, and we did a Q&A for you guys between our different platforms. So we got a couple questions that we'll be answering for you guys as well. The first one, we'll start with a question from one of our guests that we've had on the show. Actually, no, I don't think they've been on the show, but they're kind of in our atmosphere with us. We're going to be doing the Podcaster League from the commish. A recent story. So the Jets traded Jamal. What the heck is his name? Jamal Adams. So I don't know why I was thinking Jamal Williams. Jamal Adams to Seattle. This is going to impact Julian a little bit based on fandom with George Kittle. How do you think that matchup in those two games are going to go? Last year, Kittle only played one game against Seattle. So how do you think that will impact the tight ends playing them and Seattle's defense?
Okay, so, if you look just at, fantasy statistics last year, which is a bit of a crapshoot, honestly, matchups do change year after year. But overall, the Jets were a bottom 4 matchup for tight ends last season, whereas the Seahawks were a top 3 matchup for tight ends last season. So you can say, in theory, Jamal Adams being a big piece of the Jets, the Seahawks probably upgraded in their tight end stopping ability. But with that said, the question, I guess, revolves around more, are you dropping Kittle in your rankings because of it? And I think the simple answer there is no, because if you're drafting George Kittle, you're drafting him high round because you're looking for that positional advantage week after week. If you start getting too cute at the tight end position when you draft either Kittle or Kelsey, something already went horribly wrong in your season, because when you draft the tight end that high, generally you do sacrifice at other spots. So if you're playing this mix and match game with tight ends, having sacrificed that running back and wide receiver early in your draft, I hate to tell it to you, but you're probably not competing late in the year as is.
Yeah, the drafting a tight end early. Last year we had the Holy Trinity in Ertz, Kittle, and Kelsey. I had Kelsey in one league, and I did fairly well. And then I had Kelsey in another league, and my team just kind of puttered out towards the end. I made it to the playoffs at least. So, yeah, you do give up. Sometimes you're giving up either a second round or a third round player for them. So you're giving up either your starting running back or receiver in the second round, and then a depth player, your next receiver or your next running back. So you are kind of slacking on there. And plus, there's some pretty good tight ends this year. You have some really good guys in decent positions. You have Ebron out in Pittsburgh, and then you have both tight ends in Indianapolis, because Philip Rivers loves tight ends so much that he's going to throw to them, a good majority of the time. Their target share is going to be on the higher end for tight ends because Philip Rivers loves them so much. So, yeah, I think if you're drafting them to that high up, you definitely are getting away from other things that you should have, a starting caliber running back or receiver, depending on how you draft in the first round.
And I think that leads into another question that we were asked as well regarding the COVID reserve spots, because I think depth is key this year more than any other year. And when you actually look at the back end of tight ends you could draft, there are a lot of options. There is the ability to stream. You can get a little creative with matchups. Last year you could have relied purely on starting whichever tight end lined up against the Cardinals. There's going to be a team like that this year that you can find, whether it's a Gesicki or it's one of those lower end tight ends, Eric Ebron as well, as floating around late in drafts. So according to him, he would take him over 83% of other.
Yeah, Ebron was saying that he was picking him up in the first round. I don't know if that, why would you do that? Or I don't know if he said that, but he implied that he'd be picking him up very early in all of his leagues. So you can definitely join our league, Ebron, if you want, if you're taking yourself in the first round. I know some players play fantasy.
Yeah, they do. I feel like it's kind of gets a little gross when players do it, just any sports betting, to be honest. if there's any high stakes leagues the players are in, I wouldn't be surprised if the NFL tries to regulate that in years. With that said, I love the idea of people playing fantasy football. The more people playing fantasy football, the better. Obviously, we love talking about it. So the more the merrier, I say in that regard. But going back to just that question in general too, I should also say, like, how many spots are enough in given the circumstances with COVID-19, like reserves? I would say if I'm commissioned in a league, I might put as many as 5 IR spots just in case this year, because we just saw basically a whole team decide that they were going to opt out this year with the Patriots. We just saw a few other key players that opt out. That's going to lead into some headlines as well. And it's going to affect fantasy. It definitely will be one of those big stories that you have to monitor. Now it's no longer, damn, Saquon has a high ankle sprain. It's like, damn, Saquon's on the COVID restriction list.
Yeah, in my family league that I commish, we have 2. You definitely need to have those IR slots this year. I think if you don't have the IR slot, your commissioner is straight up an asshole, because you are going to lose a player or two to coronavirus. Hopefully we don't, but we've already seen with baseball, with the traveling, that almost the whole team got knocked out and had to cancel their games for a whole week. So we don't know how the NFL is going to do, if they're going to do like the mobile bubbles where when you travel, you are completely locked down. But even then, when you're at your house, I don't know how they're going to do that with, going to the store. Maybe your wife goes out. Say if you have the first overall pick and you go with Christian McCaffrey, and unfortunately he does get it, nobody in their right mind is going to be dropping Christian McCaffrey off their team. So you do need a spot to hold him on your team. And you could even make rules saying that you can't use this as an IR if somebody has a high ankle sprain and they're out this week. You can only use the IR for coronavirus positive players. Maybe that would be a option for your league as well. So definitely look into that. Talk to your commissioner. Hopefully you don't have a asshole commissioner that's just like X's everything, because just leave the league at that point.
I mean, you can make it a fun league concept, the last man standing league, where you have 0 like bench spots, 0 IR spots. You literally just put out your team each week and just see what happens. I mean, that could be a potential league option I might throw out there. I've heard about some creative league formats out there. Have you ever heard of what a zombie league is?
Nah.
Basically what it is you have one player who doesn't draft a team. So he doesn't participate in draft. So he basically picks up the scraps of whatever's left. And if that player happens to beat his weekly opponent, he gets to still hit whatever player he wants off of that team. So in theory, it's kind of like a zombie. I think it's a vampire league. One of those two. One of those like mythical supernatural creatures. But basically, if the zombie team beats you, they keep it going, keep stealing players. So you could have like either a super team by the end of the year, or you could just have an absolute garbage heap. But
so I haven't heard of that, but I have heard of a league where you try to play players that will score the least amount of points, and you can't play somebody that's hurt. Like you have to play like the team's third receiver, and hopefully they get like 1 catch for 1 yard, and the lowest score wins, like golf. So I've heard those leagues before.
I mean, I'd probably just play Jared Goff or Cooper Kupp in a high stakes matchup.
Right, they are terrible. So let's continue with the
there.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. But let's continue with the COVID aspect of this. And 2 players were added to the COVID list on the NFL. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they have coronavirus. It just means that they came in contact with somebody that had coronavirus. So you have Justin Jefferson and Keyshawn Vaughn. Justin Jefferson's spot is more stable than Keyshawn Vaughn. So just expect him to, whenever he does finally get off that list, to just come back into that role. He might miss a game or 2. I'm not sure how long the COVID list for the NFL is. But Keyshawn Vaughn and Ronald Jones, that was going to be a pretty good matchup for camp battles. And now Ronald Jones has the upper leg to win that starting job. And I know Keyshawn Vaughn's ADP was pretty high. So how would you go about drafting somebody that's on this COVID list? Would you just stay away from them? How would you run?
I mean, I personally would love it if my draft was coming out that these guys were on the COVID list, because that means they're probably going to drop a few spots. And that's always a bright side. Like, think back to Zeke Elliott when he was doing all his crazy stuff a couple years ago and dropped all the way to the second round in some drafts. Like sometimes you can get lucky. Not that these guys in particular should be getting drafted too high anyway. Like I don't buy into Justin Jefferson just stepping in and being Stephon Diggs because Stephon Diggs is Stephon Diggs and Stephon Diggs is a top 10 wide receiver in the league. So like, is Justin Jefferson that good? Maybe, but the success rate on a rookie is about 50%. So we'll see. Time will play out on that. Keyshawn Vaughn, am I convinced that he's just going to step in and be that much better than Ronald Jones? Maybe, but it's definitely going to hurt him because not only have rookies been screwed by COVID just in general with getting prepared in OTAs or mini camps or anything of that nature, but now he's going to miss snaps in training camp. So I think right out the gate, Ronald Jones is going to get the majority of the lion's share of those carries, which honestly, I think he should anyway. I personally like Ronald Jones as a player more than I like Keyshawn Vaughn. And I think it's kind of a weird ADP oversight that Keyshawn Vaughn is getting drafted over Ronald Jones. If I'm a Rojo believer, I think this is the time to go in on him.
Yeah, the ADP for Keyshawn Vaughn, I think it was like 2 or 3 rounds higher than Ronald Jones was.
That's weird.
People are down on him because he didn't necessarily have a great year last year. He was battling with Peyton Barber almost seemed like every other week. The other one was starting. And he doesn't get a lot of passing down work. That's why people are going to be lower on him. But now his ADP, so their ADP should flip. Keyshawn Vaughn should go to where Ronald Jones was. Ronald Jones should go to where Keyshawn Vaughn was, especially now that there's no preseason games to play. So you can't get those game time reps because game time reps are completely different than practice reps. And now you're going to be having a shortened off season as well. And you're not going to be getting those inter squad scrimmages. So you're not going to be able to see what the other teams are doing because, yes, you're going up against your defense, but practice is still practice. It's not game time. That almost goes for all of the rookies this year. Expect a little bit less from them. Like I was really high on Jonathan Taylor. I might be dropping him a few slots now. I had him finishing as an RB1. I'm going to have him as RB2 now, a little bit higher RB2, just because game time reps are so crucial, especially for rookies.
Yeah, and then these running backs, like you mentioned, Jonathan Taylor, everyone's just expecting Marlon Mack to just go away. Everyone's just expecting, like, a lot of these guys just to lose instant touches just because they had a rookie draft in their spot. That doesn't always happen, and it's probably not going to happen in a year, like I said, where these rookies haven't really had the actual experience of getting acquainted with their offense, acquainted with their coach, acquainted with just even the guy next to them. Hell, they're barely even doing that. Aside from when they actually have to run a play together, they're still expected to be 6 feet apart. So, yeah, like there's a lot of weird nuances to this year that will affect a lot of the younger guys. And not just those guys. I also think it's going to affect free agents, guys in new places, guys that are, especially at like wide receivers. Like if you've never like got to take throws from your new quarterback, that might be a little off. That's why I actually respect Tom Brady getting together with his guys and putting together a camp.
Rules.
Even at the behest of the NFLPA doctors, they were doing it. But you had to. Eventually, you had to. I mean, if you want to win this crazy, wild year that is 2020 and the 2020 NFL season, you're probably going to have to do things out of the box, and you're probably going to have to bend the rules when you can.
All right, moving from rookies in backfield that are definitely going to be battling for position to a rookie who's no longer going to be battling for position because the incumbent runner is opting out of the season. Damian Williams is opting out for the 2020 season. So now Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the presumptive starter unless Spencer Ware comes out of absolutely nowhere to take that spot. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire is now in a Andy Reid offense that loves running backs. Look at Kareem Hunt a couple years ago, came out of nowhere when Spencer Ware got hurt and had a bomb year. Like that dude killed it. So Andy Reid with a new running back who can also catch the ball a lot like Kareem Hunt. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's probably going to be right around that 1-2 turn, maybe a little bit higher in the first round than in previous mock drafts where he was going mid-second round.
You did bring up an interesting name, and I wouldn't completely count out like a Spencer Ware coming out of nowhere to take some touches, because the book on Andy Reid has changed a lot. Like, traditionally, Andy Reid wasn't a guy that necessarily elevated rookies. Like, he generally likes some guys with experience. But at the same time, you consider with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Patrick Mahomes petition to get him on the team. Really, he just got thrust into the number one role without Damian Williams there. Like, so I don't think Andy Reid has a lot of options. And there's certainly worse options you could have on your team than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because the guy was a beast at LSU last year. When you just think schematically with all the weapons that the Chiefs have around the field, you can easily pencil him into that running back one position. Like, in theory, I prefer him as a running back too, just off principle, because we don't know how good he is going to be. I'm assuming he's going to be pretty good. But short of that, I guess, like you said, if I could get him in the middle second round to back end round 2, that's the ideal spot, I think, for a CEH.
Yeah, I have him now being a lot like Kareem Hunt. Unfortunately, you're not going to get that, the opportunity, the value with him skyrocketing now, because everybody knows. Hopefully you have that one dum-dum in the league that doesn't follow news until like right before the draft starts. So just this year especially, you're going to have to be on top of your game, because there's not going to be that third preseason game, the dress rehearsal game, where the starters play and then twos play after that. Because generally you'll have like the first preseason game, you'll have like one series, 5-10 plays, if that. The third preseason game is generally where you know who's going to be starting, who's not going to be starting. We don't have that this year.
Yeah. So, I mean, I like you said, like it's unrealistic to consider that he's going to really drop from this point moving forward. I would just kind of take him round 2 if he's there. I mean, it's all just going to be dependent on what part of the round you're drafting. And if you're drafting front end of round 2, that might be a bit of a tough stretch. But I mean, if you love the guy, go for him. I mean, the thing about like classic snake draft is like, it just depends on who falls to you, really. And if the value's there and you're not going to be able to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire in round 3 by the time you draft on the clock again, then like I said, there's certainly worse things you could do than get a running back in an Andy Reid offense.
All right, so we'll go ahead and continue with some of the news being reported out there. So Dalvin Cook did report, so expect him to go right around where he was going previously when the holdout first started. He's going to be drafted inside of that top 10. Alexander Madison's still going to be one of the top handcuffs in the league. It's just he's probably going to be going a little bit lower. You might still have those people who draft him in like the 8th round, which I don't know why you draft a handcuff that high. Especially for somebody to sit on your bench the whole year, because he might not even play. So with Dalvin Cook, we're just hoping he plays a full season, which he has yet to do. But, this is the year of uncertainty, because we have no idea what the heck is going on.
Yeah, generally, like when it comes to like handcuffs in general, maybe I'm more on the side of I'm not a big fan of that strategy. Certainly not drafting other people's handcuffs. I think it only makes really sense if you're the owner. But it's also like a tough proposition to dedicate 2 spots on your roster to just one backfield as a whole. With that said, as far as like Dalvin Cook, good to hear. I mean, a lot of us are expecting him to at least be in the top 5 of fantasy running backs this year. So hopefully, like, he's healthy, he stays healthy, COVID and non-COVID related as well. So that's the hope for Dalvin Cook. I think just roll with him as you would normally.
All right, so we'll go from that backfield to Julian's backfield. Raheem Mostert did agree to terms, so now it's looking like he is going to be the starter once again. But that's an interesting backfield. You have Mostert, who's going to be more than likely your starter, your week in and week out starter. But then you have Tevin Coleman and possibly Jerick McKinnon.
Yeah, you definitely do have 3 guys there who could potentially carry the rock and will have some roles throughout the season. Like, it's not going to be unnatural to see, like, even Jeff Wilson Jr. get a couple touchdowns throughout the year as well. But with that said, like, the only one you're really going to go after is going to be Raheem Mostert.
And Raheem is probably going to be a top 4 round drafted player. He's and he rightfully so. Like, I would love Raheem Mostert to be ideally my flex, ideally my running back 3, but he has potential to be as high as in terms of week to week output. He could give you running back 1 statistics on any given week, like being in the Shanahan offense. He had some weeks there where he was consistently in the top 10, top 5. So if you're getting that from your running back 3 or your running back 2 spot, fantastic. I mean, there's a lot of upside there in having a Kyle Shanahan running back. Just, just week to week, just guessing the right one is going to be up to you. That's going to be your challenge as an owner. And I would just be comfortable putting him on flex because his high upside is really what you're going for.
So say round 11 rolls around, Tevin Coleman's looking at you in the face. Would you draft Tevin Coleman? Depending on my running backs, I might take a flyer on him. We know your guys' backfield tends to like to be hurt. They're not a 16-week players. I don't think you guys have had a 16-week running back since like Frank Gore.
Well, I mean, Raheem stayed healthy all last year. He just didn't start any games. Technically, Coleman, too, I believe he was still with a shoulder injury early in the season, but for the most part, he played the majority of the games. So as far as drafting Tevin Coleman independently, I think if you do, you're probably in a deeper league. You're at least in a 12-team like Expert League where people are just taking up all the good players, or you're in a 14-team league where depth is running thin in the later rounds. That's really the only excuse I would have to draft Tevin Coleman at this point. But he will get carries, and he will have the occasional game where he pops off. I just wouldn't really depend on it, and it's not worth it overall. That's the basic point when I say about Tevin Coleman.
So we'll go across the bay now. Oh, no, they're not across the bay anymore. Oh, gosh, that's going to happen so much. Let's go to Vegas. It's going to be like the San Diego Chargers. Everybody's going to say San Diego. So the Vegas Raiders, is it Las Vegas or Vegas? Do you know?
I think they're just going by Vegas.
Just Vegas? Okay.
Sounds more clean that way, too.
Yeah, so the Vegas Raiders, there have been reports now that Josh Jacobs is going to be getting more passing work, which already a top running back in this league, fantasy-wise, it's even better. So if he can get more passing work in the games, that's just going to boost his value even more.
Well, here's the thing about that. Is that coach speak, or is that actually going to happen? Because they said the same thing last year about Josh Jacobs, that they wanted to get him more like touches on receiving downs. And it didn't really happen. So, I mean, there's less talent in the backfield. They got rid of Washington there. But I do believe I'm spacing on the name here, but their third down running back is still there and is going to take up. Yeah, Jalen Richard. He's going to take up some targets still.
Yeah, hopefully, we'll still get some of those first and second down passes, which is almost non-existent last year. So let's hope it's not coach speak and it's actual beat reporting that they're going to be doing that more. But everything right now being reported is just coach speak because we haven't actually had any field time just yet. Unfortunately, 2020, we have no idea what the hell's going on. So beat writers are going to be super important this year.
Hey, I mean, we all have a Twitter. Make sure you're following some of the guys. Like if I was a fantasy player and I was really dedicated and I was in a high-stakes league, I would follow the beat reporters of all the teams I had players on. That would probably be the way to go about preparation.
Follow all 32 of them.
Yeah, and most importantly, subscribe to the Slumpbuster podcast.
So with fantasy comes a lot of sports betting. Guess what? We have a new partner. Well, not really new,
we do?
But
no, they've been with us. They're nice. They're good. They're fantastic. And honestly, I think that all of our listeners, all of our viewers should definitely check them out. We can all use a little bit more money in our pocket. And, gambling, it's not really much of a gamble when you know you're going to win. And that's why you got to check out our sponsor, razorsport.com. That's Razor, R-A-Z-E-R, sport.com. Here's a word from them.
I'm LeBron James. No, I'm not. but I'm the king when it comes to sports betting. Bet Razor. RazorSport.com.
Alrighty, so we are back. So let's go ahead and finish up the news. We're done with the running back news. Now we'll get into some of the receiver news. There wasn't a lot of tight end news out there, but another player that's opting out is Devin Funchess, who I predicted to have a decent year touchdown-wise, not necessarily receiving yardage-wise. I was really hoping for him to play this year because it would take some relief off of Davante Adams, but now, unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be the same old Packers as last year, where it was Adams and then 17 unknown Packers receivers. I mean, you had St. Brown, you had MVS, and then you had Lazard, who started to come on towards the end of the year. So really MVS and St. Brown, you can kind of ignore them. They're not going to be much of a player, but this does leave the door open for Lazard.
Well, it does, and then it doesn't, because we haven't really seen Aaron Rodgers really elevate a second wide receiver in a few years. You've seen some weeks with Geronimo Allison, you've seen some weeks with MVS, but no one's really been able to sustain value aside from Davante Adams on that team. And hell, even the games that Davante missed, there wasn't really anyone that stepped up. I think the one thing we've started to learn about the Packers and the Packers under LaFleur, they probably want to run the ball more than throw the ball. And I don't think that's necessarily a good mesh with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, we saw an interview with Aaron Rodgers just released a couple of days ago where he's already talking about his step after Green Bay. So I think in a way he's
the Bears.
Yeah, exactly. He's maybe a little bit mentally checked out, but even more so, I think his role on the offense has been started to be phased out a little bit, just a little bit. I mean, he still is Aaron Rodgers, still going to throw for 4,000 yards, but predicting where those yards are going to go has been a bit of a crapshoot the last few years. So I don't really want to invest in anyone that's not named Adams right now.
Yeah, the only other person outside of Adams and the other Ron on the team, possibly Jamal Williams. We did see a few good games from him. He might be a really good, maybe 14th, 15th round flyer. That's about where he's going this year. Plus, if Aaron Jones does go down, presumptively, we don't know A.J. Dillon's status just yet on this roster. Jamal Williams can slip into there, and he does like rain games. He says he's a mermaid and he likes to slip around. Weird dude, but hey, he gets the job done. So he might be the only other person to take a look at, especially in those later rounds.
Yeah.
In the draft.
Any of those guys, if you're drafting them, you're really just drafting them for late round depth. I'm not expecting any of those guys to pop off this year as a late round flyer.
All right. So then the last bit of news before we get into the rest of our questions is Alshon Jeffrey is now on the PUP list to start the season. What's new? So who the heck is they're going to pull out on receiver on Philadelphia? But this does open the door for Rieger to now lead the team in receiving yards, catches, touchdowns, because outside of him, I mean, you have Greg Ward Jr., if he's still on the team?
Well, yeah, that's a little tough to say because Marquise Goodwin was also a name that opted out just due to COVID, worries. But as well as that, you have, of course, we have the now canceled Deshaun Jackson as well out there. So, yeah, I mean, when you look at that, it's like, fuck, who's Carson Wentz going to throw to? Greg Ward Jr. again, Jalen Reagor. I think a lot of people are high on him potentially. I mean, he is a very fast guy. He can really stretch the field. Looking at his tape from TCU, there are a lot of questions. Like, is he just another Big 12 wide receiver? And that still needs to be resolved. But the guy is fast. He has track team speed. So if Doug Peterson and the Eagles offensive coordinators can think of a good scheme to get him open with the ball in his hands, he is going to do damage. I don't know if he's going to be a reliable fantasy option, But I think at the end of the year, when you look at his stats, you're going to be like, damn, Jalen Reagor had like 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. And I think that will be like an impressive stat line for a rookie and probably one of the better ones for rookie wide receiver stat lines overall.
All right, so this has never happened during any of our recordings, but we have breaking news in regards to the Keyshawn Vaughn, Ronald Jones debate earlier. The Bucs have now signed a 1-year deal with Shady McCoy.
Oh, wow. Shady is back. Guess who's back? Back again.
I actually kind of like that signing. It gives them some sort of difference in that backfield. I could see him possibly being the day one starter, beating out Ronald Jones.
I don't know that. I won't go that far.
You wouldn't go that far? Okay. But
yeah.
he's still going to be in rotation, and we saw with Kansas City he could still play. He may need a game or two off due to old age because he's getting up there in age. I think he's 32. So, I mean, it is definitely an interesting signing for the Bucs.
Well, here's what I'll say is, like, are you drafting LaShawn McCoy? Probably not. I don't think it would be a wise move or something that I would advise people to particularly do. Because we saw with LaShawn McCoy last year, he had a couple games where, like you said, he was a healthy scratch. Like, nothing wrong with him. The Chiefs just said, hey, let's give you a game off. The big problem with that is they gave him a game off in the Super Bowl. And, hey, it worked out for the Chiefs, and Shady got his ring. But at the same time, it's like, that's not good. You don't see people giving Frank Gore a healthy scratch. You don't see aside from the Jay Gruden game last year, you don't see Adrian Peterson getting too many healthy scratches at this point in his career. So you are seeing that from LaShawn McCoy. But there are some positive stats when you do look at him. He did average over 4 yards a carry, which is impressive for a running back at this time. But at the same time, he's not going to be running in Kansas City anymore. He's going to be running with the Bucs, and their offensive line is a little bit of a fallback from Kansas City's line. And we'll see how that offense comes together because we think all these parts just sound like they're going to be fantastic together. Throwing a little bit of Tom Brady, some Mike Evans here, some Godwin on the side, but we're still yet to be seen. It's kind of like 2013, 2012 Miami Heat. Like, you have all the talent, but do these ingredients work together?
Could you see him filling out that James White role, possibly just like the third down back?
Yeah, and I think that that's fine if he does. But with that said, are you going to get enough fantasy value to trust, like, investing in him doing that?
Now week in and out.
Yeah, but it does bring up a unique stat that I'm sure you're probably going to see on social media at some point in the next week or so. The combined age between Tom Brady and LaShawn McCoy in that backfield. I guarantee you're going to see that on Twitter as soon as we open it up.
In the league or something.
Exactly, like their combined age is 80 years or something. It's like, okay, we get it, guys. They're old, right?
Too bad Frank Gore wasn't still on the Colts team.
Yeah, between him and
Phil Rivers.
Phil, that would be an old backfield too. Yeah, man, I don't know. Sometimes Twitter is a little bit predictable with that kind of stuff. We'll probably do it too.
We probably will.
Yeah, I'm just fronting so no one else steals my idea. That's what this is.
Let's look for some dank memes.
Exactly. I'm going to tweet that out now just to get ahead of it.
All right. So let's pop into some of these questions. How do we feel about Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton combo out in Denver?
I feel as though I still have my reservations about Drew Lock as a whole. And I don't know if they're going to be the type of offense that's going to want to throw it in the air 30 times a game. I feel as though, like, is there enough workload to go around between those two guys? And I would probably put more faith in Cortland Sutton at this point just because we've seen him on the field. But not to say that Jerry Jeudy's not going to have some nice games, but I think that his floor is going to be like 3, maybe 4 catches a game, maybe 60 yards. Not really stuff that you're going to count on unless you're getting touchdowns. And I think that they're really going to use that Melvin Gordon and Philip Lindsay backfield more than they're going to use the combination of Sutton and Jeudy.
Yeah, I would have been higher on the combo Jeudy-Sutton if Melvin Gordon didn't sign there. Melvin Gordon is a pretty good receiving back. He does catch the ball fairly well out of the backfield, screens, option routes, even deep wheel routes. So if Melvin Gordon wasn't there, or maybe weeks where he's injured because he's never played 16 games in his career, those games might be a little bit better for that combo. But we still are not very sold on Locke. Like, I know I have him being like getting a step up just because of all the weapons around him, but it might just be now he has all these weapons, so he looks better on paper because they're not dropping balls or something like that. We still don't know how accurate he's going to be, all that type of stuff. So I'm still uncertain. Can that be an answer?
Yeah, I mean, so when we look at that, so Pat Shurmur is going to be the OC out there in Denver this year. And the last time Pat Shurmur was an offensive coordinator, it meant some decent things. I mean, we saw Diggs and Thielen get some decent work with Case Keenum as the quarterback. So I do think that his offense at least lends itself to being able to sustain two decent wide receivers, or, well, actually between those two guys was two elite wide receiver productions. But I think it's a little soon on Judy and his rookie year. And Cortland, I think Cortland's ready to take that next step. Based off what I saw last year, I think that you could potentially have him as a back-end wide receiver 1, or at minimum a very high-end wide receiver 2. That's where Cortland Sutton's range is at this point. But generally, I think with an old-school defensive-minded head coach in Vic Fangio, this is going to be a team that's going to want to do two things: play defense and run the ball. And I think expect that to be the majority of their offense this year.
All right, so next question. Will Edelman continue to thrive in New England now that Brady is gone? You want to take this one, or do you want me to take it?
Well, I'll start it off, I guess. But I mean, was Edelman really that productive last year? So do I think that he's going to take a step up with Cam this year? That's a tough question, because on one hand, yes, Cam run CMC, fantastic, and short yardage, just over the middle stuff. But like I said, Julian Edelman was falling apart last year. He's not the same wide receiver. And I think that maybe at best he's a wide receiver 3. I'm not going out of my way to get him, because you're long gone are going to be the days of Julian Edelman with 100+ catches. And I think that's why you're drafting him.
Yeah, he's definitely not going to have the 100+ catches. They're going to be – I don't think a receiver in Carolina had 100+ catches in the last couple of years. But it's definitely going to be, do we get 2015 Cam, MVP Cam, or do we get the last 2 years Cam? MVP Cam was somewhat accurate, threw the ball very well. The last 2 years Cam was pretty inaccurate. I mean, his throws were overthrown. Weren't catchable balls. So it just depends on Cam, really.
Well, think about what made 2015 Cam season work. It was the elevated rushing production. It was the fact that he had 10 rushing touchdowns on his year. And if you look at who was the best wide receiver on that team, it was Ted Ginn Jr. Obviously, Ted Ginn Jr. and Julian Edelman are two very different types of wide receivers. Julian Edelman's just going to do those short routes over the middle, whereas Ginn is trying to get over the top and burn you, and he may or may not catch the ball, but at least in 2015, he seemed to be catching everything that Cam was throwing to him deep, and that's what made the Panthers offense. It was actually a very unique year when you look at it. It's like, how did this offense work? How did this lead to a 15-1 season and a Super Bowl trip? So I think that when you look at Cam Newton's career as a whole, 2015 is a huge outlier, and I think for Cam, he's just trying to prove that it was more than just a fluke. He actually is an elite level quarterback. I just don't think that that's going to mean great production for Julian Edelman.
And the other X factor in that offense is going to be the health of N'Keal Harry. Does he continue to develop into a number 1 receiver like they drafted him to be? Or is he going to be battling turf toe and out for the majority of the year? So pair that with still very uncertain about Cam's health and what he is with his Cynthia doll hair out in New England. We don't know what that offense is typically going to look like yet. Is it going to be the short passing of Bill Belichick, or are they going to gear it towards more of the running style of Cam Newton?
Yeah, we actually got another like Patriots related question in there to tie that in as well. That was regarding Sony Michel. Like, what do we expect from him this year? And when it comes to Sony, I think obviously he's great on early downs. We haven't really seen him as a third down runner. And we know that the Bill Belichick coaching staff and Josh McDaniels likes to mix up their running back rotations. Like you haven't been able to count on the same guy week after week for a while. Going back to, I think, the Stephen Ridley days were the last one where I felt confident in starting the same New England running back. Aside from James White, I mean, James White has a decent floor, and I think that he's still going to get that third down production. Like, if you want to talk about a comparable to the Panthers offense, I mean, certainly James White, CMC, I mean, same kind of receiving back. Obviously, James White isn't quite the runner or the elusive runner that Christian McCaffrey is by a mile. But at the same point, I do think that we'll see that James White has his set role. He's always going to be down on third downs. That's just going to be what he does. And Sony Michel is going to have to do most of his work on first and second down. And if we don't see him start to pick it up and show that he is a pass catching back, he's never going to elevate past running back 2 value. That's just going to be the bottom line when it comes to Sony.
The only other problem with Sony is the fact that he's more than likely going to start the year on the PUP list, which opens the door for Rex Burkhead. And if there's one thing that we know about Bill Belichick is he doesn't care who you are, everybody's replaceable.
Yeah, on the bright side, at least Brandon Bolden was one of the names that opted out, so fantasy owners won't have to see touchdowns stolen away from that man.
I hated that man so much.
Like, how it feels like he's been in the league for 15 years and just been stealing touchdowns away from whoever's supposed to be the number 1 running back in New England during that time span. Brandon Bolden, I think, has just been a constant thorn in fantasy owners' sides for years. But watch, it's not just him. They'll fucking give the ball to their fullback as well and still touchdown every now and then. What's his name? James Devlin.
Luckily, he retired, so he's not there anymore.
Yeah, they'll find someone else. They'll give it to a 300-pound defensive lineman just to give that fantasy heartbreak that much more.
God. Yeah, I hate owning Patriots players. I love the fantasy output of most of them. James White, I love him, especially in PPR leagues and stuff.
Yeah.
But
it definitely looks better at the end of the year. When you actually look at their stats, you're like, oh, he had 1,000 yards. He had 6 to 10 touchdowns. But on a week in, week out production standpoint, it's you'll get a Jonas Gray game,
And then cut the next day.
Because he didn't set his alarm clock. I know we tried to change the narrative on the New England backfield a couple years ago, fantasy community. But let's be honest about it. It's still the same cluttered mess that it's always been. And I think it will always be that way regardless of who's under center at quarterback.
All right. So did you watch any of the NFL Top 100?
I did. I have a big problem at number 1. And I think that's
the question. So unfortunately, I didn't get to watch it because I'm currently in the process of moving stuff for a new house and whatnot. But I did watch some of the clips on the internet, and I was following the Instagram posts. And when I saw Pat Mahomes at 4 and Lamar at 1, I know they got scrutinized a couple years ago when Matt Ryan won the MVP and wasn't the best player in the league on the NFL 100. So maybe that's what they're doing. If you're the MVP of the league, you're automatically the number 1 quarterback. But even Russell Wilson at 2 was a bit iffy for me.
Yeah, over Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah,
it's just it all relates to Patrick Mahomes. It's are we really making the case that one game? I have one game to win. Do I want Patrick Mahomes under center or do I want Lamar under center? Now, I love Lamar, what he did last year, and that may run contrary to the why they suck. Lamar, I mean, we're just getting roasted on that video currently, but we love you guys still. Absolutely going to suck. He's going to suck, though. 100% going to suck. But no, here's my thing is Patrick Mahomes, I feel regardless of what we're talking about, whatever category it is, he has the edge. And I think you can make an argument, oh, Lamar's more athletic, but I don't think the athleticism gap is so wide that it overcomes the gap between Patrick Mahomes as a passer and Lamar as a passer. Because we know Patrick Mahomes as a passer, it's one of the best arm talents I've ever seen in my life. I may have missed Brett Favre, like prime Brett Favre, given our age group. But when I look at Patrick Mahomes, it just feels different. It's something unique. And Lamar, as just a quarterback, as purely a quarterback, has never approached that kind of standard. Now, when it comes to Russell being ahead of him, Russell's closer. I still think would flip those two as well. I mean, they both have similar resumes in terms of the Super Bowl championship, but the difference is we joked about it in the Why They Suck Russell Wilson video, but he's never received an MVP vote. Patrick Mahomes has in 2 years won an MVP and a Super Bowl trophy. And then even at 3, Aaron Donald, it's just like we have this debate, I feel constantly like, well, we know Aaron Donald's just a freak. He's just an insane human being. But you go poll every single GM in the league. If you can have Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Donald, who do you take?
Yeah,
Who's going to have a better season? Who has a better impact on the game?
You're going to go Mahomes.
Yeah, because what is Aaron Donald's high side? Maybe he'll get a couple sacks during the game. And yes, that will be disruptive. Don't get me wrong. But it's not going to be what Patrick Mahomes is doing on the entire other side of the football.
Yeah, and to kind of go off of the gap of athleticism, last year in the Detroit game, Mahomes escaped the pocket. And there was a good 5 yards stretch where he was escaping the pocket, where he's looking at the ref while running full speed this way just to make sure there wasn't a holding penalty because he said he didn't want to run 40 yards for no reason.
Yeah.
The athleticism's still there, but one thing I can knock him on is, have you seen his little hustle walk thing that he does?
Yeah, okay.
That's really it.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. It's like we got to nitpick to really hate on Patrick Mahomes. We can legit name concerns when it comes to Lamar Jackson. We don't know if he's going to sustain the same success that he had in 2019. We hope so. I mean, I'm rooting for the guy. I know I'm not rooting against Lamar. I do think that one of the narratives that does bug me about Lamar is we talk about him like he wasn't drafted in the first round. I feel like I've seen too many people post the clip of him as the only quarterback waiting on draft day in the first round. It's like, guys, he was still drafted in the first round. And by the way, it worked out. He got drafted to a good franchise. You know how many guys ahead of him got drafted to crapshoot franchises? I mean, look at Josh Allen got drafted to the Bills. The Bills historically have been a mess. Josh Rosen went to the Cardinals, and God help him. I mean, that destroyed the man's entire career. And then look what's going on with Sam Darnold in the Jets. Thank God Lamar dropped on draft day because that's made him what he is today. That's made him Lamar Jackson. I'm on the Baltimore Ravens. I'm on this kick-ass team that is a Super Bowl contender, a playoff contender year after year. I'm not dealing with Adam Gase and his crazy eyes. I'm not dealing with whatever the Arizona Cardinals do on the daily basis. Hell, Baker Mayfield at one with the Browns. I guess it comes down to this. If you put Lamar Jackson on any of those teams, is Lamar Jackson still Lamar Jackson? Yeah. And that's probably how I would kind of personify it as well. So, I mean, the NFL 100 list, players all the time have this opinion. And I feel like every time we see some of these lists, it's really who's the shiniest new toy, who had the biggest, brightest season, because it's one of those things. You could have made the case that Patrick Mahomes is the MVP every single year, just based off what he did. If he didn't miss those 3 games this year, he might have been a repeat MVP. His stats weren't too far off from where they were the previous year. And there were some interesting names you also saw sprinkled throughout the list. I mean, I got to give a shout out. I mean, I'm just happy that Jimmy G got ranked over Dak Prescott. And that was one of those fuck you to Cowboys fans right there on Twitter. But yeah, overall, a unique list. It always gives us something to talk about as a sports media community. So I can't hate on the NFL 100 too much. Not too much.
I have one gripe.
Okay.
Nick is better than Joey.
Well, here's the thing. At least coming off last year, you would say that Joey's been a little bit more banged up throughout his career. And the one season we had of Nick, and I'm hoping this stays consistent, he was able to stay healthy. And despite the sack numbers being a little bit low, like for the force that he felt, like you look at Nick Bosa's season, you're like, he only had 9 sacks, really? Because the thing about Nick was he just had more pressures. He was always a disruptor in the opponent's backfield. So I do think that may have given him the edge over his older brother there. And Joey has even said it himself. He thinks Nick is better than him. He said that to other players. In fact, if you ask Joey today who he put on his NFL 100, I wouldn't be surprised if he ranked Nick ahead of himself.
Yeah, and we probably didn't do you guys any favors coming up in a couple of years.
Yeah, I know what that
contract.
That contract, yeah, I know. But I guess that's just how NFL contracts work. Just like whoever's next gets paid the most, and you do kind of wonder when those numbers are going to plateau. Like they have to kind of level off eventually, because we're already talking about Patrick Mahomes with $500 million. Are we talking about legit billion-dollar athletes at a certain point with the NFL? Is that something that's going to legit happen?
Yeah, it's just I don't know, because if the TV contracts keep going up, that's really what drives the salary cap. So if TV money still goes up, the contracts are going to keep going up. But
we're not going to have any fans in the stands this year. We got a lot of stuff that's going to be unique this year that hasn't happened in most seasons. I think we got a couple more questions, do we not?
Yeah, we do. So the next question is going to be, does Kyler live up to the hype this season? And I think he does.
Yeah, I guess let's rapid fire through these. This is starting to turn a little bit of a long one. But yeah, no, when it comes to Kyler, yeah, I mean, I'm drafting him as a top 10 quarterback. I think
and he has a shiny new toy.
Yeah, I think the volume's there. Even if D-Hop doesn't necessarily live up to expectations, I think the fact that they're in just this air raid offense that's going to air it out throughout the game, I think that's just going to play into a fantasy production that, every player can get behind.
Can Lamar live up to 2019? And it all depends on rushing. So the John Harbaugh has already said that he wants to scale back his rushing. So if they scale that back, he's definitely going to be a lesser version fantasy-wise, because it was those rushing numbers that definitely helped him out. So if it's coach speak, then he's not going to live up to it. If it's not coach speak and athlete does what athlete does, and he just goes basic muscle memory and starts escaping the pocket and making plays, then yeah, I think he can live up to it.
Yeah, and same kind of situation. It's to be honest, I think it has to be coach speak, because if you are going to dial back the rushing attempts, then you're essentially changing your entire philosophy on offense. And when you're number 1 seed in the AFC, do you really want to change up your whole offense? I think that's going back to, this speaks to Greg Roman himself. When he had Kaepernick as his quarterback, they also tried to make him more of a pocket passer. And I feel like sometimes you just got to lean into what works, and what works is running Lamar. So if has as many attempts as the previous year, then yeah, you can absolutely pencil him to be a top 2 quarterback.
Yeah, they never really, we weren't around much fantasy-wise for this time, but Mike Vick, I don't ever remember reading reports that they want him to run less.
Yeah, and well, that's the thing though. Vick's runs were not a lot of designed runs. Generally, every now and then when he broke one, it would really impact fantasy performances and elevate your team. Yeah, Vick's performances are kind of unique when you compare it to Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, the Ravens know what they're doing, and they're deliberately running the ball 300 times with him in a season. So it's hard to scale that back completely.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait and see. I guess we can't wait and see in preseason because guess what? There is none. So we'll have to wait week 1 to see if that is coach speak, if there's a lot more designed runs or a lot less designed runs or exactly the same amount. So I'm going to say if it is coach speak, definitely Lamar's going to drop off. That's why I have him ranked a little bit lower on the list, is because I'm banking on them wanting to keep their franchise quarterback healthy and upright and not RG3 him. So I have him a little bit lower, saying that he's not going to live up to the hype.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess on that note, that is it for us. Like we said earlier, just make sure you are following all of the news, especially this year. It is a crazy year. We have no idea what the heck is going on. We don't know who's going to opt out. We don't know what is going to happen news-wise because, as you see during the show, we get some breaking news. So just make sure you're following those beat writers. Make sure you're following NFL, Adam Schefter, all of the insiders that you can for this year, because doing your homework is imperative this year. If you don't do your homework and you're just trying to follow the games, which are not going to happen, you're going to finish in last this year unless you absolutely luck out and draft nobody that gets hurt or gets coronavirus. So
what if the dog eats your homework?
That's not an excuse because, hey, Kimber, you want my homework? Come here.
Not very appetizing.
No, she ran away because she's scared of everything.
A lot of empty calories.
Exactly. So that'll be it for us, guys. Look for more of that why they suck, because your player is absolutely going to suck this year. So look out for more of those videos. You're already listening to us, so you know where to find us. All major streaming platforms. Like, rate, review, subscribe, download. Give it to your friend. If you don't like the show, shut the heck up and don't say anything. We don't want to hear any bad remarks. Julian? Yes, that's it. We're out.